Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Black in Genetics Week education discussion on applying to graduate school and, in particular, writing personal statements and diversity statements. We're joined today by a current graduate student who can answer some of our questions. So, if you don't mind introducing yourself, can you tell us who you are and what school you're coming from?
So hi everyone. I'm Shandu Maraudzi. I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa, and I moved to the US for college in 2017. And I'm currently coming from Harvard Medical School.
And where are you in your career?
So I am a fourth year PhD student. I came to graduate school right out of undergrad, where I studied computer science.
Wonderful. So just to get into the basics of a personal statement a little bit, can you tell us just like in a quick little sentence or two what a personal statement is?
I look at the personal statement as an essay of sorts that introduces you to the selection committee at a school and gives them a sense of your background and the reasons you have for pursuing the program you're applying for. I also think it can be helpful to look at a personal statement as an opportunity to show the selection committee what you have done in your previous experience to prepare yourself for the program you're applying for. So, for example, I focused a lot on my previous research experience in my personal statement and talked about what I had learned from all of them.
Wonderful. And when you were writing these personal statements, did you write a different one for each school that you applied to?
Not exactly. So all of the graduate schools that I applied for needed a personal statement, and they were all structured in mostly the same way. I used mostly the same content for each of them because it was sort of like a common theme about my background, which I wanted all schools to know about. But then I I sort of tied in different school specific things for each personal statement. So, for example, which faculty I wanted to work with and which school resources I was most drawn to. So, I tailored each one slightly for each school, but like I'd say 80% of the content was the same.
Perfect. So now I'm going to ask some questions about like the actual practice of writing the personal statement. That can be kind of like daunting to students who are endeavoring to do it. So my first question is more personal. Were you nervous about writing your personal statement?
Yes, I was very nervous about it. I was worried that I wouldn't portray myself in a way that would be most attractive to institutions and that I wouldn't stand out amongst other applicants. Um, and I, I'll be honest, I procrastinated writing my personal statement a lot because of that nervousness. Like the fear of not writing a good enough personal statement definitely made me put it off for much longer than I should have.
Yeah, I can also relate to that when I
Yeah.
was in writing my personal statements. So I guess everyone kind of talks about the purpose of the personal statement is to convey your story and highlight you. You talked about highlighting the ways that you were prepared for the program you were applying to. Like, what were some of the ways that you did that? Did you use examples and like just tell people? Did you like sort of like list all of your accomplishments? What was your strategy?
Yeah, I'd say my strategy was like in the introduction, so the beginning of my personal statement, I talked more broadly about my life growing up, and because I feel that it related very much to why I was interested in the field I was applying for. So, to be more specific, I talked about how I grew up in South Africa and how that had made me very aware throughout my whole life about how devastating infectious diseases like tuberculosis are and why that was what I wanted to pursue in graduate school. And I'm actually now currently researching tuberculosis. And that's not to say that you need to know exactly what you want to research in grad school, but the more specific you're able to be, the better, and the more able you can tie in experiences from your past and how they relate to that interest, I think is really helpful. And then in terms of the rest of the statement, I sort of took it chronologically in terms of the research I did in undergrad and then what I what I took away from each experience in terms of specific scientific skills that I had learned, as well as more general uh, research skills that I had learned.
Wonderful. So, I guess when you talk about sort of like telling your story and your reasons for pursuing the program that you're wanting to apply to, how much of your story did you feel like you should tell the reader? Like every detail. Like sometimes it can get really long, and these personal statements have space limits. So, how much would you recommend?
Yeah. It can be definitely tricky to determine this. So I'd say like if you can look at it in a framework of um, well, I guess tell as much of the story as it relates to one, your interest in the field in which you're applying to. Um, two, I'd say your interest maybe in the specific area of focus you want to pursue if you know that already. And then maybe a third thing would be, ways in which you've proven to be a hardworking student or researcher. So any sort of specific examples you can give from your past that relate directly to those three things, I'd say would be really helpful to include.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for all of those details. In terms of like sort of a more practical standpoint, you mentioned procrastinating. So, what did your writing timeline actually look like, and did you have anyone edit your work?
Yeah. So yes, as mentioned, I definitely procrastinated a lot on it. But yeah, I guess I think it's helpful to share that about my experience because if any of you are feeling like you do not have enough time to write it, you can definitely still get it done, but certainly start as early as you can. So I ended up working on it for about 2 weeks in between a lot of college classes and projects. Probably spent like 2 to 4 hours on it each day. And ideally, I would have had my previous research advisor look over it because she was on the application selection committee for her institution. So she was very familiar with statements like this. So that's someone I would recommend having look over a personal statement if you have access to a person like that. Since I was so pressed for time, I just had my mom read it to make sure my language was correct and that I was being as clear as possible. And so, yeah, that was my timeline.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, and my last question is pretty open ended. It's just whether you have advice for prospective students who are working on their personal statements now.
Yeah. So I'd say I think one thing that really helped me in my process of writing this was that okay, so I did this a couple of times throughout the 2 weeks that I was writing my personal statement. I would just sit down in front of a blank page and write whatever came to mind. So I would just let ideas flow and wouldn't worry about like word choice or about structuring it too precisely. And I would just try that. That was my attempt at trying to think of like specific themes and specific experiences in my life that I think would work best in the personal statement. And so I did that a couple of times and eventually landed on a theme that sounded the best to me and then ran with that. So I think just giving yourself a little bit of space to be creative can be really helpful. You might be surprised at what you land on.
Yeah, that's a really great bit of advice. I love the creativity. So yeah, that wraps up my questions. Unless you had any other concluding thoughts.
Um, no, I don't think I have. I think those questions were very thorough.
Very good.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Shandu, so much for meeting with us and sharing some insight on writing personal statements. We really appreciate it, and I hope that everyone learned something from this call.
Yeah,
So,
it was my pleasure.
thank
Thank
you.
you.